We want our communities to be healthy and vibrant.
And so we march together
to demand justice.
While a handful of politicians try to make us fear each other,
we're onto them, and we count on us.
And so we turn up
and we turn out as voters.
To make this a place where liberty and justice are for all.
For all.
For all.
Para todos.
Vote.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's a beautiful thing. Yep. A little bit close. Yep. And clap. So we are here with actor, producer, director, activist,
yes,
country traveler. You're on a U.S.
on a
tour,
wild tour, yeah.
But really a tour to, save democracy. As I guess dire as it sounds, it's so much on the ballot that deals with just our basic rights as individual. Of course, women's rights are on there. You have the #1 movie on Netflix in the world right now, but you're not at the club like popping bottles and celebrating. You're going state to state. So talk about like what inspired you in this moment to say, I have to get out here and I have to go inspire folks to get out to vote at this moment.
First of all, it's so great to be able to chat with you. I feel really blessed to be sitting with you. I guess I've been really interested in doing this work for a long time. I grew up in a family where my parents have always been fairly politically active. I remember, one of the first times I remember my parents having a major disagreement was the Anita Hill, Clarence Thomas hearings, because they were both very politically oriented, and we had those conversations. And my dad doesn't like me to talk about it now because of who Clarence Thomas has shown himself to be. But at the time, he was like, wow, look at what they're doing to this powerful black man. And my mother was like, well, look at what they're doing to this black woman. And I think it was my first moment of kind of being aware of my intersectionality and how complicated politics can be. And then in high school, I started working with a theater company that was a theater and education company where we used to teach people. It's sort of around AIDS education, AIDS prevention. So we did a show about, safer sex issues. And a lot of times we would go into a school or a community center or even a church, and they would bring us in to try to save people's lives, but they would tell us, you can't say the word condom, or you can't talk about homosexuality. And we'd be like, well, then we can't do the show, right? So there was like a personal politics that was brewing within me in my adolescence. So I've been somebody who's been interested in community and in activism and politics for a long time. And for me, I guess I just thought, as I become more and more successful as an actor, I don't want to let go of it. I don't want to let my desire to be liked by people get in the way of my willingness to show up for the people, you know?
Well, I would argue that work makes you even more likable and relatable. At least to us, we love you. Well, we appreciate you. And I think it's interesting because, as a black woman, when you look at the most supportive voters, right, the most engaged and involved organizers in our community, even if we go back to Black Lives Matter and that organizer, it's been black women. Yeah. A lot of your work centers black women. Yeah. You invest in black women's businesses. Can you just talk about obviously you're a black woman, but what does it mean to pour into, women just like yourself that are doing great work all over the country?
It's everything to me. Like you said, I am a black woman, and I noticed in my career, people would ask me often, why are you so drawn to political work? And I was like, am I drawn to political? I think I'm just drawn to great stories about great characters, but I was drawn to work where my character was centered or where black folks were centered. And I realized, just because I'm choosing projects that take marginalized people and put them at the center of the story, other people interpret that as a political act. For me, it was mostly a creative act, right? And often work would come across my desk, right? I'd have the opportunity to audition for something where like the lead character has an abortion or or is a teen mom, like in a film like Save the Last Dance, right? And I wasn't afraid to take on those roles and really make those women be three-dimensional, fully realized human beings. So to me, that wasn't necessarily a political act, but I understand that it's political in a world that wants to look away and not see us as central to the narrative of this country.
I mean, that's so fascinating because really that's how One Hood comes about. Like our origin story for One Hood Media was in 2010, the Heinz Endowment did a study of how specifically black men were portrayed in the media. What they found was like 90% of the time it was crime, right? When it came to quality life stories about black men, it was less than 3%. And so we went to Heinz. I participated, I was interviewed for that study, and I remember going to Heinz as an artist and saying, hey, what would it look like if we could teach young black men how to analyze media, but really create media for ourselves and like tell our own story? This is before like narrative change became a thing. And so when we launched the One Hood Media Academy early on, it was just all young men. And we had a young woman named Patience show up, and she was like, look, I'm an artist. I like what y'all doing. I want to be involved. And then we was like, can we open this up? And they were like, sure. And we were able to kind of open it up. But for us, a lot of it is like through art, like telling our own stories. But that is very political because like oftentimes the stories we're telling are stories that aren't normally seen on the media or normally sees even in Hollywood. I think Hollywood is getting better now about telling these stories. So to me, it's powerful that now that you're in a position to not only act but like create these stories, that you're making sure like you're centering the stories that mean a lot to us in our community. So thank you for that, and thank you for that work, because to me that is very important work. Speaking of important work, we're blessed as One Hood to be a part of the Vision into Power cohort.
Oh, we're so blessed that you're a part of the cohort.
And look, I remember getting the emails like, do we want to be part of the cohort with Kerry Washington? Of course we do. What are you talking about? So can you just, again, you're doing your work kind of individually, and you talked a little bit about it today, right? You would come in and kind of inspire people, but you wanted to get deeper engaged, invest in grassroots organizations all across the country. So what went from, like, how did you go from I'm coming in speaking to like, I really want to invest in these organizations?
So I tell this story a lot, but I woke up in 2016, the day after the election, and my social media was flooded. I was like, why is Olivia Pope trending? And everybody was like, Olivia Pope, you have to fix this problem. You got to save the day. And it was a little bit funny, although I was in like a similar trauma that everybody was in that morning.
That moment.
Yes, right? We were all terrified. And I started thinking like, this is not okay. It's not okay that in a moment of genuine trauma in this country, real crisis, that we are looking to an imaginary character on television to save us. And I started realizing like, we have forgotten two things, or maybe just don't know. Maybe there's been a disconnect. That number one, we have more power than Olivia Pope, because Olivia Pope is not real. She can't vote. She can't register voters. She can't volunteer. She can't do community activism. She can't be an organizer. So every single person who was tweeting that out has more power in their community than an imaginary character on television. Also, there are real people doing real work, like real community organizers who are spending every day figuring out how to engage voters and really save us, right? And so I wanted to figure out how to tackle both of those ideas. Like, how do I, as Kerry Washington, as Olivia Pope, how do I go into communities and help people understand their own power, their own agency, that they matter, that their vote and their voice matters, because there were so many people that didn't vote in 2016. And then how do I take the spotlight that's on me and shift it to people who are doing the real day-to-day organizing in communities to uplift the issues that matter? And I started realizing, like, even I had spent time, like, going into communities saying, you should vote for this candidate. This candidate is the answer. Because we kind of get engaged in like hero worship in this country, right? Where we're like, who's going to be the next person who runs? Because that person has to be amazing and they have to be perfect. And that's just not how it works. Like, no one person can fix the problem. And I really wanted to I really wanted to figure out how to stop going places every 4 years and asking them to do what I want them to do, and figure out how to have long standing relationships with communities over time, where I give myself to the community rather than the candidate. Because I realize if I come in and say like, your vote matters, I'm here for so-and-so, but your vote matters, people are like, no, you're here for so-and-so. Right. But if I could figure out a way how to be in a community for the long haul and say every day, your vote matters, and by the way, now that we're in election, this person cares about what you care about, I thought that might be more effective. Absolutely. So I convened a bunch of people in 2018 in New York, people who were really at the front lines of these issues, experts, like Tram Nguyen from New Virginia Majority, and Art Reyes in Michigan from We the People, and also folks like Jocelyn Benson, right, like secretaries of state who really care about voting, to convene them and say, like, what do we do? How do people like me make a difference and not be part of the problem where we drop in and just cause more work for organizations? And out of that meeting, a lot of ideas came to fruition, but the cohort was one of them. So we identified 10 incredible organizations all over the country, One Hood being one of them, in states that are really important and necessary to help us maintain democracy. And we found organizations like yours that are doing this incredible work. And I just am looking for ways all year long to uplift you, to give you more resources, especially around storytelling and narrative and communications and media, but also just love and sharing love to the community and finances, and figuring out how to let you be the superhero that you are, to grow that out and to support you.
It's so interesting because I think as somebody that runs an organization that gets funding, right? A lot of times we talk about more than money. I think what's so powerful about the Vision and the Power cohort is of course it's monetary support, but really training, like the storytelling training, the video that our organization can use to kind of even allow more people to support us and find out about us. You're using your own platform. Of course, whenever we're on there, we get all types of followers. And in a place like Pittsburgh, it's very meaningful, right? Like, oh, I saw you with Kerry Washington. And so it causes people to look deeper into what we're doing and kind of support that work. So it's really, really powerful. So we've benefited greatly by being a part of the cohort. Just want to thank you again for allowing us to be a part of it. So I just two more questions. One is, a lot of the voters that we deal with, right? We specifically try to target people in our community that aren't voting all the time, right? That sometimes might get involved, or kind of like the voters on the fringe, right? Or maybe sometimes they become disillusioned with politics. A lot of what we focus on is younger voters. We use art and culture to kind of bring them to the community. So for somebody like yourself, what do you say if you find somebody that's maybe delusioned with the political process, or maybe the divisiveness around this election? What are some words of support and encouragement that you give them to no, this is why we really need to go out and make sure our voices are heard?
This is a big question. This is something I think about all the time. I want to say one thing about the cohort before we jump into that. One of the things I love about the cohort also is watching the organizations, all 10 of you, join forces, right? Because at that meeting that we held in New York, you started realizing Art has been a fan of Tram's, and Tram's been a fan of Art's, but they've never gotten to meet. They've never gotten to share notes and compare tactics and strategies. So seeing the 10 organizations also create a family and a community, even on Zoom, has been really exciting.
I just got DM'd by one of the organizations this is what we're doing down here. We see you in Philly. We see the great. And so like you said, it does create that kind of family atmosphere.
We need that in this country right now to make sure that we're uplifting each other and not feeling like separate satellites doing the work. We really are all in this together. Absolutely. I think about this. I think about that question a lot because I just want more people to be engaged in the democratic process. And maybe it's because I'm a romantic, but I love those first 3 words of our Constitution, we the people. I love those first 3 words. And I know the history of this country. I know that when those first 3 words were written, it did not include all of us. That women weren't included, that black folks weren't included. We were considered 3/5 of a human being in that Constitution, that indigenous people weren't included, that even white men who didn't own property were not included, right? You had to be a wealthy white man to be we the people. And I feel like what we've been doing over these hundreds of years is working to live up to those words, really having everybody be part of that American dream and figuring out ways to get everybody involved. But it's hard because the system wasn't built to include us at first. Sure. And so I do think it's easy to say like, wow, look at how few people are participating. But when you look at where we come from historically, I do think we're doing an incredible job, right? Because I met somebody in Michigan whose 74-year-old father was voting for the first time. Wow. Because he grew up in Mississippi. And he was part of a system that really, really worked to make him feel like his voice didn't matter and like he couldn't participate in the process. So I think we're doing a great job, but of course we need to do better because the reality is that I think a lot of people are disillusioned because they feel like politics doesn't have anything to do with them.
Right.
And I love to remind people that you may not be thinking about politics, but politics is thinking about you. 100%. Politics is your everyday life. It's the decisions you make. It's the freedoms you have. It's whether or not your community has justice and equity. So I think part of making young people feel like their voice matters and their vote matters is to get them on board. Like, because I find that once you participate, like once you get in the game, it's so much fun. Yeah. You start to feel the hope, because hope is really about like having a plan and believing that you can execute on that plan, right? Absolutely. So when you jump on the train and you start knocking on doors or making phone calls or going to rallies, it gives you a sense of empowerment. So I think that's a big part of it. I like to remind people that our elected officials, they work for us, right? Yes. They get paid when we pay our taxes. Every time we get a paycheck and we see all that money that's been taken out for tax, that's their salary, right? Yes. So we're the boss and they work for us. And the way they know how to deliver is that we show up to vote. Because you really work for the people who hire you, Absolutely. Right? So there's something called high propensity voters and low propensity voters. And that's this thing that campaigns trace, where they look at who's voting and who's not voting. And the people who are voting on a regular basis, they work to take care of the issues that matter to that community. 100%. And the people that don't show up and vote on a regular basis, they don't care so much. So it's like, if we want to get the things that we need in our community, we have to show up and vote. How we vote is one of the ways. It's not all the ways. There's a lot of work to do across culture and activism, but voting is one of the ways that we show up to get what we need. And I think it's important to think about, because I think fundamentally we don't vote when we feel like we don't matter. Right. When we don't believe that our communities are important enough to get what they deserve, then we give up.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. I mean, I think about, like, since we got involved, with the Vision and Power cohort. I mean, in 2021, we were able to rally behind a community, politician, but really community activist that we all knew, in Ed Gainey, and we were able to support him and have him become the first Black mayor in the history of Pittsburgh. And it's like, what it does, it's like now, like, we have access. Yes. To the mayor, like, we can call him. Like, of course, he's not going to do everything we agree with, but now
he has to be accountable.
100%, right? We were able to get 5 progressive judges elected, 3 Black women. Wow. And so now, like, we know a lot of times in our community, our first connection sometimes with the system is through the court. Yeah. And so now here's somebody on the court that, doesn't support cash bail or might share the same upbringing, perspective that you had. And so I think for us, so we're like, look at these wins and look at what we're able to do. We have a race where we're trying to make history with the first Black congresswoman in Pennsylvania history. And for us, Summer Lee isn't just a candidate. She was with us at the protest, at the rallies, fighting to get justice for us, like right beside us. And so now it's like, this isn't just a politician, but this is a member of our community. So I think thinking about also like tapping people that we have a connection with to even run for office is another way we can get folks involved. Absolutely.
It's huge. And a lot of that is education, right? Because a lot of the people who say that they're frustrated with politics, if you ask them what they're frustrated about, then you say like, well, you can have an impact on that if you vote. Like I was at a community meeting this morning where somebody was saying, well, you need to take responsibility because really what we need is more arts in the community, and arts education is being slashed, and we got to make sure that art is in the schools. I said, I know. When the Obamas were in the White House, I was on the President's Committee for the Arts and Humanities. I worked to keep arts in the school. But you know who really is in control of budgets when it comes to arts education? That's your local school board. Those are midterm elections. Those are those local elections that people come out, we try to get people to come out for the presidential elections, but the midterms are really where those decisions get made. So I know, you want more parks in your community, show up for midterm elections. You want to have an impact on cash bail, show up for your elections. If you want midterm elections, you want to impact schools, midterm elections, police reform, midterm elections. Like, yes, there are important people on the national stage. I've been uplifting Fetterman all week. We need him. We need him in the Senate to protect voting rights, to protect a woman's right to choose, all of that, to get, sensible gun reform in these streets. But the local elections, that's where you really impact the stuff that matters to you on a day-to-day basis in so many ways. So, and a lot of people just don't know that. Like, a lot of people don't know you vote for judges. You vote for, or like sheriffs, or, there's a lot of positions that are so important to how we live our lives. And I'm just grateful that you guys are out there having those conversations, reminding people or teaching people the power that they have.
Absolutely. And like you said, like in this midterm, the differences are so stark, right? Fetterman is somebody that has a history of doing criminal justice reform work. He's going to go and protect the women's right. He's going to go with the thought in mind of working class folks in Pennsylvania. Josh Shapiro is somebody that also worked with reform. We're here with Michelle Kinney. Michelle Kinney and Josh Shapiro worked to create a database so police officers couldn't do wrong and then just move on to a next thing.
Right.
They worked on that together. And Doug Mastriano was literally at January 6th, like he was at an insurrection. So we do have those stark differences. And so we appreciate you taking time out of your incredibly busy schedule to come to Pennsylvania and help us make those things. So my last question is just, what brings you joy?
What brings me joy? Well, my family brings me a lot of joy. I love my husband and kids, and that's a big part of why I do this work, because I don't want my two daughters, to grow up with fewer rights over their body than I had. I want my son to grow up in a world, I want him to grow up on a planet that's still here, and to be able to get a job. I want my family to exist in a country where there's sensible gun reform, where, the gun drills at school terrify me. I want better for my kids, like any parent, and that's part of why I'm out here doing this work. It brings me joy to hear about all the work that you guys are doing all over the country, because I think it can be really overwhelming when you look at all the issues that we're facing all over. But I think when you're part of a community like the one that we're building, and you see how, wow, they're doing that in Pittsburgh, and they're doing that in Virginia, and they're doing that in Arizona, like you feel a sense of faith. You feel like, I know that there's a lot of issues, but I also know there are incredibly smart and talented people on the ground who are devoting their life to this work. And I think spending time with my parents, my kids, my husband, and then being in the community doing this work. And I love the work that I do as a creative person. I mean, I love all the members of our cohort, but One Hood has a special place in my heart because of the creative work that you do, and because there's so much of an understanding of how much culture and cultural literacy fits into change. And so I love being able to be a storyteller. The work that I do as a producer. I'm really proud, for example, of our show Reasonable Doubt that's on Hulu. That's a show that I directed the pilot and I executive produced, and it's a really powerful show about a woman who is, she left being a public defender to be a criminal defense attorney, the conflict in her life, being a powerful working woman. But the show's also about what it's like to come out of prison, to be a re-entering citizen. Michael Ealy's doing an incredible job playing somebody who's up against the struggles of what it takes to have a life when you come out of prison. And you know, one of the scenes I'm most proud of was Sean Patrick Thomas, who I worked with a million years ago in Save the Last Dance. He plays a black billionaire on the show. And I think it was in our 3rd or 4th episode, there's this incredible montage to Jay-Z, the story of OJ. And it's of these 2 black men having their stuff rifled through by police officers. Wow. One, it's his parole officer, Michael Ealy's character, and Sean's character, it's the cops who are in his house because he's a murder suspect. And you see that it doesn't matter how much money you have in this country as a black man, there's stuff you're up against. There's a perception that you're up against at all times. So it's being able to tell those kind of stories, you know, like make a show where every episode is named after a Jay-Z track, right? Like we're honoring him, we're saying like he's a part of our cultural lineage, he's a part of our legacy. That stuff brings me joy, makes me feel proud to be impacting culture in positive ways.
Thank you so much. Well, I know we took a lot of your time, so I want to thank you. Thanks to your family for like allowing you to come and do the great work that you're doing. We appreciate it. Thank you for allowing us and supporting us to be a part of the Vision and the Power cohort. We also want to thank Dr. Mark Lamont Hill. We're here in
his shop.
Uncle Bobby's incredible coffee and books.
Come visit in Philly.
Germantown. Yeah. Come get your books on.
And thank you to Movement Voter Project also, who are our partners in the cohort.
Absolutely. So with that being said, Tuesday,
get out and vote.
Get out and vote.
We need your vote. We need your voice.
Yes. Yeah. Peace, y'all. One hood.
Over the course of a few years, life yielded a crisis of pandemics, resulting in many reeling and searching for answers. Black men especially have had to grieve the passing of hip-hop icons DMX, Michael K. Williams, Biz Markie, and many others. How has this impacted Black men? How has this altered the way they see themselves, their ability to express themselves, and their mental health? We sit down with Black men raised on the culture of hip-hop and ask them directly, let's have a bite, take a step back in order to move forward. I'm your host, Miracle Jones, and this is Brunch with the Black Man.
We know what keeps us safe. It's having communities where people of all races and genders have the fair wages, great schools, and health care we need. But for too long, certain politicians have profited by making us fear each other and blocking common sense measures, from gun safety to police accountability. We know what keeps us safe, and as voters, we'll deliver it.